I think that if you look at just the scientific model of how we are structured, that by the time we're 35 years old, we've done so many things, so many times, that it becomes an unconscious habit. And 95% of who we are is really unconscious thoughts, automatic habits, emotional reactions, beliefs, perceptions, attitudes that function pretty much behind the scenes of our awareness. So the process of becoming conscious of what you're unconscious about yourself begins the process of change. So how you think, how you act, and how you feel is called your personality. And your personality creates your personal reality. That's it. So if you wanted to create a new personal reality, you'd have to change your personality, which means you'd have to start thinking about what you've been thinking about and change it. Become aware of your automatic habits and behaviors and modify them. And then look at the emotions that you've experienced that keep you anchored to the past. And really look at them and decide, do these emotions really belong in my future? So when you begin to think differently, when you begin to act differently, you begin to feel differently, your life is going to change. So most people like to wait for a reason to change, like a crisis or a trauma or a diagnosis from some disease. And now all of a sudden, they realize that they can't go on living the same life any longer. They have to change something about themselves. So I think that my message is, why wait for that trauma? That when you teach people that they can begin to create a better life for themselves and even improve their health and give them the tools on how to do it, it becomes more effective for everybody. You know, here's the key, is that we are already wired to do this. We're always in the process of creation if we're truly relaxed and beginning to think about what we want for ourselves in our lives. When we're living in stress and we're living in survival, then it's not a time to create. So getting people out of those survival states and into more creative states allows them to do what we're innately wired to do.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I can tell you from traveling around the world now and doing this for many, many years, that many people are actually doing it very well. And it's a skill. Just like anything you do over and over again, you get better at it. And in the beginning, it's difficult because we always come up against some aspect of ourselves in order for us to move into a new life. So the hardest part about all of this is really making time to do it. That's it. And many people spend the majority of their life waking up every morning and running through a series of routine behaviors, seeing the same people that push the same emotional buttons, doing the things at work that they know that they can do so well, thinking the same thoughts, living by the same emotions all day long. And as a result of it, if you're thinking the same thoughts, making the same choices, demonstrating the same behaviors, creating the same experiences, and living by the same emotions every single day, your inner world is going to be a complete match with your outer world. In other words, your biology is going to be in a tango, in a dance with your outer world, and nothing will change. So then, if you keep thinking and acting and feeling the same way, you condition your body to become the mind. So then, if you're waking up every morning and you're running through a series of routine behaviors that you did yesterday, then your body's already programmed into a predictable future based on what you did in the past. So we use the model of meditation. So a person sits down and they close their eyes and they disconnect from their outer environment, the people they know, the things they own, the places they have to go, the experiences that normally they create every day that reaffirms their same emotions. So if they're not experiencing their environment and they're closing their eyes and they're playing soft music in the background, or they're plugging their ears with earplugs, that's less information. If they're sitting their body down and not getting it up and doing something and not eating or smelling or tasting or feeling with their body, that's even less sensory information coming into their body. And if they're sitting down, they're not thinking about all the schedules they have to keep or all the past things that happened yesterday. They're truly in the present moment. It's when we get beyond our bodies, get beyond our environment, and we get beyond time, that we really fall into the sweet spot of the generous present moment. And that's really when we connect to the quantum field where all those potentials exist. So then getting to that point where you're being defined by thought alone, because now your inner world is more real than your outer world, begins for you to begin to condition the environment to get beyond your body and to create some new experience in your life. And it takes practice, but we've measured enough brains now in all of our research that it becomes a skill, and people slip into these states very naturally. We do several scientific measurements during our advanced workshops. And our advanced workshops, we just did a few in Mexico just last month, and it's an opportunity for people to retreat from their lives for 5 days and really deepen their understanding of the work, and really create, when they walk out of there, create a different life for themselves. And so we do the measurements right in our advanced workshops. We measure brain waves, we do brain scans, we do heart rate variability, we measure epigenetic changes in urine, we measure neurotransmitters, we measure cortisol levels, we measure the energy of the room, energy around people's bodies. We measure as much as we can, because we want to demystify the process. Well, it always, we have a community of 500 or 700 or 1,000 people in a room. It's not just the energy that they bring, it's the type of energy they bring. So when you combine a clear intention, which is a function of the brain, and an elevated emotion, which is a function of the heart, it tends to create a more broadened electromagnetic signature that surrounds people's bodies. Now, the type of energy that's created is very rhythmic, it's very coherent, it's very orderly, it's synchronized, and it's like dropping pebbles in water. They become very, very rhythmic. That energy carries an intent, a thought. And so if I'm sitting next to you, or there's 1,000 people or 500 or 700 people in a room, and everybody's energy is becoming coherent, the moment those two energy fields interact, they interfere. When they come together, they are going to create a bigger amplitude, a bigger wave. That bigger wave is a higher energy. And we've measured this over and over again in our advanced workshops, and we've made scientific history, because the energy that at the end of the event is way higher than the energy when we start. Now, what does that mean? That's available energy for people to heal. That's available energy for people to create a new life for themselves. That's available energy for them to have a mystical experience, and on and on. So there is power in community, but it has to be the combination of that clear intention with an elevated emotion, because the majority of our time when we're living in stress, we're actually drawing from the field. So the energy of the room will go down. So how do you teach people, instead of taking from the field, to give to the field? And we know that when you get a community of people together, and they're all wearing heart rate monitors, which is a function of the autonomic nervous system. If 50 people are sitting in the front of the room wearing heart rate monitors, and everybody else in the room is creating a clear intention with an elevated motion, that all those people wearing the heart rate monitors, that their lives be enriched, that 90% of them, all their hearts go into coherence at the exact same time. In other words, they're being influenced by that energetic field, and we are bound by that field. And the emotion that binds us is love. It's the glue that keeps us forming community. Well, this is a great conversation. It is.
It is.
It'll just take you longer.
This is not good news.
It'll take you longer. So the more elevated the motion, the higher the frequency. The higher the frequency, the shorter amount of time it takes to manifest in a person's life. The more they're living in competition and struggle and suffering and guilt, it's a slower vibration of energy. So it's still producing a field, but the energetic field is slower, which means they're going to take more time in their life to create it. It may take 20 years, it may take 50 years, but an elevated emotion tends to collapse time. Yeah. Well, we know that from looking at enough scientific research in studying people in the process, that I can tell you that you are at your absolute best when you get beyond yourself. And there is a moment where we can predict when that's going to happen to a person. So the resistance that typically takes place with a person is that they're afraid of the unknown. They'd rather hold on to their suffering. They'd rather hold on to their insecurity. They'd rather hold on to their bad habits than take a chance and possibility, because the body is not comfortable in the unknown. That's why we feel uncomfortable when we change. But that place where you feel uncomfortable, that unknown, that void, that is the perfect place. The last month, people do supernatural things.
Right.
Well, heal themselves from very serious neurodegenerative diseases, create objects out of nothing. We've made scientific history in the last 4 years, over and over again. And the cool thing about it is that the people were just common people like you and I. That's point number one. Point number two is that we use science as the model, the language, to demystify the mystical. And that when you start talking about religion or culture or tradition, you divide an audience. So we use the scientific model to help people understand by combining quantum physics with neuroscience and epigenetics and everything else, but in an easy way, a really simple way. So then once they understand it, we put them into the experience. And once they see Graziella stand up and say, I just had this amazing experience, the next person sitting next to you is going to say, well, she looks a lot like me. She's not a monk or a nun or a minister or an academic or a scholar or a famous person. She just looks just like me. And so we're breaking through that barrier now. And the beauty behind it is that anybody can do it. So people are taking their power back because you don't need an authority to get answers any longer, whether it's a priest, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a doctor, a governor. You can get information on your own, and that begins to empower people. So, but this is a time in history where it's not enough to just know. This is a time in history to know how. And so there's a division. There are people clinging to the old models. That's normal. But more and more people are stepping out into this understanding because they have a greater level of awareness. And a greater level of awareness means they begin to look at more possibilities. Well, it's not that hard. Number one, take time out of your busy life to invest in yourself. When you invest in yourself, you invest in your future. Number two, before you open your eyes every morning, sit up and ask yourself this question. Who am I going to present to the world today? What is my greatest version, my greatest expression, my greatest ideal of myself that I could be today? And begin to become conscious of your unconscious thoughts. Notice them. Become aware of your automatic habits. Look at the emotions that you live by every single day. The more conscious and familiar you become with them, the less unconscious you'll become. The word meditation means to become familiar with. And then sit down and decide what thoughts you do want to empower and fire and wire in your brain. What behaviors you do want to demonstrate and rehearse them in your mind. The research on rehearsal shows that you begin to install the circuits in your brain. You prime your brain ready for the day. Your brain looks like it's already in the experience. And then decide, I'm not going to get up from this meditation or my morning until I feel in love with life, until I feel abundant, until I feel worthy, until I feel empowered, invincible, free, caring. And when you begin to feel it, it's that emotion then that begins to become more familiar to you as well. And so if you get up and you can maintain that modified state of mind and body your entire day, get ready, because something unusual is going to happen